Marketer of the day, number 427. Think about money differently, build cash flow, and optimize like a millionaire with Chris Miles. Hey everyone, and thanks for listening. We have a return guest on the show. His name is Chris Miles. If you want to check out his original appearance, which was also great, that's at marketeroftheday.com/103. And Chris Miles is the cash flow expert, and he's the financial advocate for the entrepreneur. And he's the leading authority teaching entrepreneurs and professionals how to quickly free up and create cash flow today, spending time doing what they love most. He's an author, and he's a podcast host of the Chris Miles Money Show. He's been featured in U.S. News, CNN Money, Entrepreneur on Fire, and has a high reputation with his company, which is called MoneyRipples.com. And he gets his clients fast, life-altering financial results, and his clients have increased their cash flow by over $100 million in the last 7 years. Awesome stuff. How are things, Chris?
Amazing.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. And so yeah, it's been a while since we talked. Last time you came on the show and set us right about understanding if we're a spender or a saver. You talked about how we should all be using this app mint.com to kind of connect our bank accounts together and see charts and graphs. And I started using that the day after we began talking. So amazing stuff.
Sweet.
What's on your mind these days?
These days, the biggest thing on my mind is getting people out of the rat race, I love, I've worked with a lot of business owners over the years, of course, and I believe the business should be your number one investment, right? Because, the whole reason I got into business is because I wanted to, actually have that control of my own schedule, my control of my own money, my hours and time and everything, right?
Right.
And control of my own destiny, essentially. And the thing I've learned over the years, and I've seen with a lot of people, what's happened is they have that same kind of dream, but they get stuck working pretty much paycheck to paycheck, almost owning a job, They're stuck in that rat race where they feel like they've basically bought themselves into a job, and now, even though they own their own business, they're really the business actually owns them.
Yeah, and that's a scary place to be, and I can relate to that in a lot of ways. Like we've all had kind of businesses like, go have like the rise and fall and different things in between. And I can definitely relate to, I can relate to the fear in general, right? Of, being in a job you hate, saying, you know what, it's always been my dream to start my own business. But then the fear is, well, now I've kind of taken a step down because now I'm putting in even more hours for maybe even the same or less money. And even worse, like not having that reliability, not having someone to even tell me what to do. And then having kind of like, having just like a whole host of different problems, right? Like feeling bad if the money is not what it should be. Or then if the money is great, then being like, oh, well, now maybe it's time to take a vacation, and just being like confused and not knowing what to do. And I think a lot of us can relate. So for entrepreneurs, what's the starting point? What the heck should we do to kind of get over this, I guess, new rat race that we created for ourselves?
Well, definitely. Some of the things we talked about last time, our last episode, that definitely helps because we want the cash flow freed up. We want the ability to be profitable, right? Because when you have cash flow, it creates options, and then options create freedom. And so that's always the first step. Make sure you know what's going on with your money. But the second step from there is, and applies whether you have, a side business, and you're trying to go full-time into that, or you're full-time in your business, but you don't want to be so full-time anymore, right? Or you want to have the option not have to be full-time. And that's where you want to start generating multiple streams of income and things like that. And so, if you start I get a lot of clients come to me, they're like, okay, I've been trying to, put money away now, and I could reinvest in my business. But even then, I don't know if I need to keep reinvesting it because I don't know if that's going to be the best return. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. What do we do? When we start being profitable and having this money, now what? And that's really where it kind of depends. I had one client, for example, who's in the Midwest, and I remember he was like 62 years old and burning out. Like 3 years in a row, his business is declining and everything. In his particular case, it wasn't even just investments. And for him, the best investment was actually getting him to have that fire again in his business, but without having to kill himself,
Right.
And so what we found is in his particular case, we actually were able to pay off, use his retirement account, which is a total cardinal sin for financial advisors, right? Take money out of his IRA, paid off some of his loans and refinanced and did some stuff, where just $100,000 out of his IRA was able to create an extra $50,000 a month in cash flow for him.
Dang.
And which the funny thing is, he was scared to death. He's like, oh, I shouldn't do that. This is my retirement. I'm like, who cares? It's giving you retirement, 50,000 a year guaranteed. Like, come on. And it finally took his wife, who had more common sense, to say, this makes sense. Like, stop being a weenie, and so we ended up actually doing it. He freed up, not only did he free up like $4,200 a month, but what happened is he relaxed in his business to the point that he actually increased his sales conversions and made another $2,000 a month within just a few months. And he was actually happy. He was loving his business again. But the cool thing is he freed up like 70 grand a year.
Yeah. So like when you figure out a plan for someone like that, what's your thought process? Like, do you start with the goal, and how do you, I mean, like, do you like run different scenarios and things like that? Like, how do you decide what the plan should be, and how do you choose when to kind of go against those really important rules there?
Yeah, I mean, really, it comes down to cash flow, right? Because I mean, even when people like stuff money away into crappy retirement accounts and things like that might make you, if you're lucky, 5-6% a year. I mean, everybody's been spoiled the last 8 years, so they think like, oh, I can make 10%. It's like, it's bull crap. You won't. Watch the next few years, you'll find out why. Everybody forgot what happened 10, 15, 20 years ago. And so it's like, no, let's find out what gives you the most cash flow right now. And because I get a lot of people, they're like, hey, how can I get to the place where I could actually retire? Or if they're trying to get their business to go full time, how they could quit their jobs and then go full time their business. And so it comes down to cash flow. And I mean, I had a guy recently where in his case, we actually said, all right, he's got this IRA and old 401k and stuff. And now if he cashed out his old 401k, the problem is not only he's not even 59 and a half yet. That guy was 62 before. This guy is like, 40. And so he's got a long ways to go before he's supposed to touch that retirement account. But his goal was cash flow. Like, how do I get myself to the place where I could quit? And so we looked at it and said, well, if we want to retire in the next 5 years, for example, we got to like focus on this cash flow thing. And so for him, we looked at the scenario of what happens if we keep the money in the account and go invest it differently, like in unconventional stuff like real estate or whatever. Or do we take the tax hit and the penalty and everything else? And for him, the total was about 40%. So he gets about this 40% tax and penalty hit if he cashes out now. But when we did the numbers, we looked at the cash flow, we realized he would actually make an extra few $1,000s a year by doing that versus keeping all the money intact. And so we're like, well, crap, let's cash out and take that 40% hit and get that money making money now and creating a plan to get him to retire in the next 5 to 7 years. And that's the cool thing. And so sometimes it's, like I said, paying off debt in some scenarios. Other times it's doing, passive income investments, whether it be in real estate or in other places. Whatever it's going to take that doesn't take a lot of your time and attention away from your business, which should be your number one economic generator, right? Your number one income generator.
Oh yeah, I agree 1,000%. So when you make these kinds of plans for people, I mean, like, is it a matter of like, do you get to know the person, or is it just a matter of like what you feel is right? Like, how do you kind of decide like if someone's going to do something kind of out there, or kind of like maybe something they hadn't considered before? How do you decide if something is like not enough or too risky, or how do you like find that sweet spot?
Yeah, for us, like it really calls for creating a relationship together. We got to get to know each other and know what's going on. We really co-create it together is really what happens. I know a lot of people want me to be the guru and just tell them what to do, but I don't work that way. Like I realize that when it comes to like investing, right? Like the problem is everybody's done investing because they just do it to make money. But the thing I realize is that you can also, just like with a business, you can have investments have you create a job too. Because if you're just doing it for the paycheck, what makes it any different than just working a job for a paycheck?
Right.
So if you do any kind of outside activities outside of your business that you love, it should be something that you still actually enjoy, And so half the battle is just trying to figure out what would you like, what intrigues you, or what kind of fascinates you to the point where you would, whether you make money or not. I mean, obviously you want to make money, but whether you make money or not, it's kind of cool. And we go from there, and definitely we want to make sure we take low risk to create high return, because that whole high risk creates high return is false. I mean, never have I ever seen 90% chance of losing creates a 10% chance of, creates a 90% chance of winning, right?
Right.
90% chance of losing means you have a 10% chance of winning, and that's just stressful. And there's plenty of things you can do that's low risk. In fact, the highest risk things are what most people do, like putting your money in mutual funds and such. That's probably the easiest way, guaranteed failure to have, because I've run the numbers for years. I've been a financial advisor of sorts for at least 15, almost 16 years, and I can tell you I've run the numbers left and right. There's no way the market will perform good enough for you to be able to say, hey, I can actually be financially free. Like you just cannot pack away enough money to do that. It's going to require doing things outside of that, both creating streams of income within your business that's residual or passive, as well as things outside of your business. And it really, if you focus on cash flow, not just accumulating money and storing up money like a squirrel collecting nuts, you'll find out you can actually create massive acceleration, massive velocity, and get yourself to a place where you can be like what I'm talking about doing right now, which is being a place where you could actually have the choice to retire, have those streams of income coming in where you don't need to make the money anymore.
I love that. More choices, so then at least you can decide, like, now I have more freedom. Now I can choose to keep going the same path. If I want to do something different, I can. I mean, choices sound great to me. But like you said, there's all kinds of different things that people can do out there. And it sounds like a lot of people, I mean, I guess I know a lot of people don't make those right financial decisions, and maybe they not even making any kind of decision, just kind of taking things day to day. So, I mean, do you recommend that people out there, like, they do some reading or they contact a financial advisor like yourself? I mean, what's kind of the action steps people should be taking here?
I think the best thing you could do, I mean, there's definitely cool, there's other podcasts out there just like your podcast, there's not a lot of, I mean, there's books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. If you haven't read that, I'd say that's a good starting point. If you've read that book, then you've already got the start to thinking differently. And so, there's my podcast, The Chris Miles Money Show, that I always recommend people listen to because there's stuff on there. But it's really like getting that experience first, like kind of understanding what's out there, getting your mind to think differently, to pretty much deny everything you've been taught your entire life. Because I'll tell you, for me, even though I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, as a financial advisor, I wanted to believe in the financial advisor, traditional financial advice that you've been given. The same old save everything, spend nothing, be cheap, pack that money away into some stock market or mutual fund type of investment. Do that forever so that hopefully someday you might have enough to retire. I mean, that's pretty much, if you dumb down all the financial advice, it all comes down to that, right?
Right.
I mean, there's no magic mystery to it. The problem is it hasn't worked for years. And I remember I was 3 years, I was a traditional financial advisor for the first 4 years of my business. And I'll tell you, like, it was interesting. When I met with one of my brother-in-laws, he grew up in a family that actually did create millions through their businesses. And so they thought differently. And it took me 3 years to have the confidence to say, hey, you know what? You should meet with me. In my mind, I'm thinking, I'm smarter than you. Like, I know a lot about money, stuff that you probably never heard of, And so I remember I sat down with him. I wore my best suit. I spent hours on this presentation. I brought a guy from my office to back me up just to, kind of get the extra power, right?
Right.
And after I presented to him, he said, okay, that's a cool presentation, Chris. So let me get this straight. You're saying if I just give you 10 grand to play with, you're saying you might be able to make me 12% in a year. Is that correct? And I was like, well, I can't guarantee that, but that's what it's done on average since 2000 BC, right? That kind of crap, which we've all found out. I mean, that was during Y2K days. And so we've all found out since then it's more like 7% if you're lucky. But I was like, no, I can't guarantee that. But yeah, that's 12%. He's like, okay, Chris, well, that's $1,200 in a year. But Chris, I can take 10 grand and I could put that in my business. I can go put a down payment on a semi truck, turn around, sell it a few months later, and make a 20 grand profit. That's a 200% rate of return in a few months. So 1,200, 20 grand. So Chris, why would I invest with you? And my answer was, well, you should be diversified. You shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket. I mean, besides, business is risky. And I just said the very thing that every single financial advisor will tell you. The very thing. And I remember he just said, okay, well, thanks for your time. See ya. Because here's the thing. I mean, him trying to invest in crap outside of himself versus investing in his business like that, he knew down to a formula that he could create awesome returns with his money, right?
Right.
So for him, that was the best investment. And I'll tell you, every financial advisor out there is going to tell you to do that kind of crap like I was trying to tell him. And so that's why I kind of refer to myself as an anti-financial advisor. And that's why I would recommend people listen to my podcast show to kind of see what the difference is. Because I've mentioned a few, but there's so much more. You got to break free of those chains of that crappy conventional advice that hasn't worked for decades and will continue not to work for decades. You got to do it differently. You got to almost do the opposite of what you've always been taught and trained to do.
I like it. So this business owner kind of had an objection that you couldn't overcome. You thought that there had to be a better way. And then, so like, how did your business change from that point? What did you do differently afterwards?
Well, after I kind of, sulked around for a little bit, and with my tail between my legs, I realized that there was truth there. And it kind of started that chink in my armor, that little hole there, that exposure. And as time went on, as I started to actually meet with other people that were millionaires, people that actually had made millions, whether investing or through business or whatever, they laughed and scoffed at the kind of stuff that every financial advisor teaches. And so it was the beginning of 2006. It was March of '06. I went to a seminar that some millionaires put on. And I was like, man, who would teach the kind of crap that everybody's talking about? Only realized it was me. And I remember I couldn't be in integrity anymore. I was like, I can't teach this stuff anymore. I can't make it work. No matter how much my pocketbook's tied to it, no matter how good my business is starting to do right now, I can't do this anymore. I quit. So that next Monday, I remember I went in my office, put in my resignation. I said, I'm done. See you later. I'm going to go teach ballroom dancing and do mortgages. And that's what I started doing. And it was just a few months later, I actually got someone who was a mentor myself. I was like, I got to learn what these guys know. Like, I got to do it. And it was just, for me personally, I mean, I did it pretty quick because I was just very coachable and I went fast. And within a couple months, I was actually able to get out of the rat race. I was actually in a place where I could retire by July of that same year. And I'm not saying that everybody will do that, but I've actually done it twice. I did that, came out of retirement to teach what I teach. I actually ended up, getting back in the rat race with the Great Recession. Like, I got hammered. The ambition of my 20s caught up to me in my 30s. And so I got from millionaire to $1 million in debt. But then in about 3.5 years, paid about all of that off and got back out of the rat race again just in the last year and came back much wiser. And so I'm one of the few people I know who's able to retire twice before he turned 40.
Funny. Well, yeah, I mean, success is never a straight line, right? And sometimes it's like sometimes our ego gets the better of us and we say, whoa, like that big, crazy bad thing that happened to me in life, that was a lesson to kind of, for me to like go through and kind of regroup and go through the humility phase and then kind of come back out of it even better than before. And so
it's a blessing.
Yeah, blessing in disguise, but only realize that looking back at it. And so, I mean, so you have like the podcast, and you have like a book, right, and websites and things like that.
Yeah, I have my website, moneyripples.com, MONEYRIPPLES.com. And on that, I've got like an actual free ebook you can download that we talked about in our last show too, which, it's called Beyond Rice and Beans, 7 Secrets to Free Up Cash Today, which is a fantastic, easy read, fast, easy read. If you're just looking for like the top 7 ways that my clients, like hundreds of clients that I've had, that they've been able to free up the most cash. And so it's great if you're trying to find ways to get more cash, but definitely the 202 is the podcast for sure.
Awesome. Okay, so moneyripples.com, there's the ebook, there's Beyond Rice and Beans and all that great stuff. And so, okay, so it's one thing to have like a podcast and a website and a book, but what other things have you been doing lately to get yourself out there?
Not a whole heck of a lot. I mean, I'm on interviews like your show, of course. That's one of the great ways, but really most of it's been through my podcast. I've actually been connecting with different guys that are more investors. One thing in particular, like there's a strategy I teach even experienced investors that have blown their mind, where they can actually get their money to make money twice. And it's been actually really fun lately because even though these guys have already started to do things to create passive income, usually they just do the typical thing is, hey, they liquidate their savings accounts. They might get, home equity lines of credit and stuff to go invest with, but they're using cash out of their savings to go and invest. And they make cash flow, really good cash flow. But the thing I teach them is, hey, rather than using a crappy savings account that earns 0.nothing% and gets taxed on 0.nothing%, I teach them how to use like tax-free accounts. They can actually leverage it and actually create interest as well at the same time. So essentially, still go and invest, but they almost act as if their money is still there, earning compound interest too. So they can actually make money in 2 places at once.
Crazy.
So that's been kind of the next level. I've been taking some people, and it's been so much fun. We've rocked some people's worlds. Even people that have been worth millions and tens of millions of dollars have been like, crap, I should have done this years ago.
Well, it sounds like with all these different things that you were describing in last show and this show, it sounds like you have a lot of enthusiasm for what you do, and you have a lot of these like really interesting ideas, and it sounds like they're marketed as opposed to just being kind of, listed out like in the jury way, but they're also really like compact and simple. And so like, is that on purpose? Do you have a secret to taking this thing that maybe some people don't want to hear about, finances, and making it exciting?
Well, yeah. I mean, because money is kind of a depressing subject for a lot of people, and I can guarantee if you're listening to this, you might have something similar. I've learned, and I've learned this even since middle school, when kids would want to cheat off my papers, I would rather just teach them how to do it, and I would teach them from a very like simple, basic level so that they could get it, so they would leave me alone. and and so I kind of do the same thing in my business. I don't want them to leave me alone necessarily, but I kind of teach it from a very simple, easy, common sense approach. Because even if you get financial people that are brilliant, the thing is they sound like freaking nerds, you know?
Yeah.
And in fact, it's funny because I shock people because some people are like, oh, you're actually smart. You actually know what you're talking about. In fact, there's one guy who was a neurosurgeon, retiring from neurosurgery to be an investor, worth like over almost 20 million bucks. And he's like, based on your marketing, I kind of thought you were kind of an idiot, but you actually know your stuff. I'm like, well, yeah, like I don't talk over people's heads. I don't talk condemningly like most financial people do. For me, to stand out in marketing, I teach it simply. I teach from a place of non-judgment, which, because people feel shame and stuff around money, because every business owner will tell me, Chris, I'm kind of embarrassed because I should be better off financially than I am, which every business owner says. Doesn't matter if they make tens of thousands a year or millions a year. They all say the same thing. And so I come from that place of, hey, I don't judge you because honestly, I was $1 million in debt at one point. I was probably worse off than you were. And hey, this stuff is simple. And the easier and simpler we make it, the easier it is to act on it and actually get results. And so, yeah, that's very much intentional and on purpose.
Perfect. I like that a lot. It's almost like you're thinking about things from your customers or your clients' point of view. And and definitely for me, like especially when I was in my 20s, going to that accountant, the tax person, it felt like going to the doctor. Like I had an accountant back then who I don't have anymore. But anytime that there was like something tax wise that I was supposed to know but I didn't know, she would just like bury her head in her hands, and I just remember feeling I remember feeling so bad if I had like a down year sort of, and I'd feel bad about like, oh, well, I'm sorry the number isn't what it is. Or if I had an up year, then there would always be some kind of flaw or something that I hadn't taken care of. And like just something the money was great, but then there was like this thing I hadn't, paid or hadn't categorized right. And I felt bad. I felt like every time I went in, it was like I was failing a test in school. And so it's a great, you definitely stand out from just like a lot of the people out there, it seems, where, like you said, they're kind of too into the jargon, and just because it's simple for them, everyone needs to know it. And it's like, well, not all of us are like that. And so, so last time that you were on, we kind of talked about a couple of like quick things that people could do in their own like personal finances, like use Mint and like look at those expenses and look at things like are we spending thousands of dollars on food and stuff like that. And so for us entrepreneurs, if we're building a business or keeping a business going, do you ever see any like low-hanging fruit that people are just missing? Like, should we be like super focused on like tax advantages, or should we hire people early? I mean, where are entrepreneurs missing the mark when it comes to their money?
All over the place. And that's good, because I mean, I see that as like potential. It's kind of funny because people are like, I'm getting excited. I mean, because there's so much to work on. They're like, oh, great. I'm like, no, this is good. Like, there's cool stuff we can do. Taxes are definitely a big one. Like there's a lot of strategies that people can do, and I'm not an accountant, but I know that a lot of times when I start looking at somebody's situation, I know just enough to be dangerous and be like, okay, let's get you to a good accountant or good CPA that can teach you these kind of things, because here's a few strategies. Like, like there's one for those that have the ability to even work from home, right? Corporate rent is a great strategy to use, where you could pay yourself, say, one day's use of your house per month, for whatever business activity you're doing, rather than renting a meeting space at a hotel, for example, or at a Marriott. You can say, hey, I'm going to rent my house for a day. And then as long as you don't go over 14 days a year, all that money you're paying yourself is totally tax-free. So say you go with a typical, like maybe like a Marriott type day's use, maybe like around $1,250 a day. You do that 12 days a year, that's $15,000 you can pay yourself tax-free, which nets you roughly about, depending on your tax bracket, anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000 a year of savings.
Amazing.
Which is huge.
And a lot of people don't even know that's a thing, including me.
Including a lot of accountants too. I mean, although there's some that do know it, most of them aren't comfortable to know how you actually do it to where it's legit, right? because a lot of them will say like they hear it, they're like, oh, it's not legit. But I remember I had one client that questioned me on it, and I actually looked up two sources, including Inc. magazine, who said, hey, here's how you do this strategy. It's like, there it is. Like your accountant that told you that was wrong and it's going to get you audited is full of crap, because even Inc., which isn't like always the best education, still had that information there for you. You could have Googled it and found it. Your accountant apparently can't even Google.
So how do we overcome stuff like that? Like if we hear of a great strategy, but then we're thinking that the accountant or the financial advisor is going to be like super conservative about it. I mean, should we do that? Should we like look for proof where other people have reported to kind of like, I don't know, convince them to our side, I guess?
No, not at all. That's why I actually have a whole team of people that I've already vetted and get it, Because I mean, that's one thing people ask. Like, okay, my CPA, they're kind of passive. They only talk to me after the year is already over, and that's too late to make some changes. Or they don't teach me this stuff. Like even that corporate rent strategy, people are like, I learned more from you than I learned from my accountant, and you're not even an accountant. And so that's where it's like, okay, good. Let's find the team of people and find the right people to support you that get it. Even attorneys. Like I'll tell you, my attorneys help me in so many cases with liability lawsuits from time to time, and things like that. Oh man, like it's having the right people on your team that aren't just the average Joe Schmo. I mean, if you want to up-level your money and your business, you got to up-level your team with it too. You can't keep the same old people and expect that you're going to up-level, because they're going to hold you down. They're going to hold you back.
I love it. So as your business grows, have those people grow with you. And what I'm hearing a lot from you too is like, is do with people who are specialists in some way. Kind of like, if you were making a website and you were making a website or a sales letter for like a weight loss product, you could go and hire a copywriter, just, any old person who makes a website, or you could hire someone who all they do is make a website for weight loss stuff, and they all know the ins and outs, all the tips and tricks. And so that solution that you just suggested there of, go to your vetted team of people sounds great. So how can people do that?
Well, I mean, obviously, you could try to find it on your own. I've spent over a decade doing it myself. So I can shortcut you that way. But some people, you can always come up with your own team. You might have decent people on your team already, and that's great. Usually when people come work with me as a client, like they want to know about whether they keep their team or not. The thing is, hey, if my people can't do anything better than what yours do, then keep them. Keep them on your team. If they can do better, then it's worth it to you and your family. For your own safety and your own sanity, for that matter, is to have a team that's going to do the best job for you. Because I'll tell you, your time is way too valuable to become an expert for those people. You can't be spending all your time teaching people how to do their job. They should be the ones helping you, not the other way around, So
yeah, I agree completely. Like you're paying them anyway, so you have to learn the stuff and you have to pay them just so that you can get caught up to them. Sounds sort of backwards. And so
it is.
So contacting you personally sounds great. So is there a way for them to reach out to you through moneyripples.com, or an easy way to do that?
They can. Yeah, they can reach out to me through moneyripples.com. Absolutely. Or just shoot me an email, personally through that site.
Okay, great. So moneyripples.com, and then go and shoot you an email. And is there anything specific that they should say or anything like that? Should they just say like, hey, I heard about you from Robert Plank. I want to talk to you about my money, something like that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's actually a thing where it says you can ask for a money leak evaluation. So if you want to get a money leak evaluation, you can have that done too.
Perfect. Well, money leak evaluation. And like you said, it's from what I'm hearing from you, you make it a point to have an abundance mindset instead of a scarcity mindset. It's really tempting. Right. It's really easy to say, oh, there's all this flaws. Look at this huge mess. But then you're like, well, look at all these great things to fix. Look at all these ways where we can save money, and then you'll see a huge difference. Look at all these ways where we can take this money that's kind of dead weight right now and turn it into cash flow. So that's a great great life advice in general, right? A lot of people talk about, turning lemons into lemonade, and I'm not even really sure what that's supposed to mean. But if we can look at like all the bad stuff, well, those are all things to improve. So great outlook, great advice. Any last pieces of advice before we sign off here, Mr. Chris?
Yeah, again, I just want to reemphasize that, everybody's trying to teach you to accumulate money and be in it for the long haul, quote unquote. Man, whether it's in your business or in your personal finances, it's always about how do you create cash flow now? Like, how do you do it today? Like one of the biggest things I see, I actually did a podcast on this recently, the two worst investments that everybody's putting their money into is their home and into their retirement accounts. And I've shown so many people like, hey, if you can just stop doing that, like stop throwing all this extra money towards your home to pay off your debt, quote unquote, or trying to pay into this long-term account that gives you no rate of return. You get a negative 100% return when you throw your money into your home or into your retirement accounts because that money doesn't create cash flow now. And so if you can reverse that mindset and say, hey, what do I do to create cash flow today? Man, this is when freedom and opportunities and options open up in your life. And that's where real financial freedom comes from, is when you have more options. So consider that.
Great advice. I love it. Get more options, create cash flow now, because you'll never get that time back. And everyone, make sure to go to moneyripples.com. And thanks so much, Chris, for being our return guest and for wowing us with all your great knowledge and stuff again.
It's been an honor, Robert. Appreciate it.
Please take a second to rate and subscribe to Marketer of the Day in the iTunes store. It's free. marketeroftheday.com/iTunes.